food products and support American jobs. Joe Biden has a plan to bring small businesses and manufacturing back. That's because Joe Biden believes the future should be made in America by all of America. He'll bring back critical supply chains and create millions of jobs. He'll lower healthcare costs, close tax loopholes for corporations, and make historic investments in our schools. This is a plan for working families. This is Joe Biden's plan for the future. And this is how we will build a better America.
Thank you for joining this Biden-Harris campaign event. What's at stake? Economy in Wisconsin. Please welcome Wisconsin State Assembly Minority Leader Gordon Hintz.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and also in honoring and celebrating Indigenous People Day. We have a great group of speakers joining us. Right now, our country is at a crisis point. Our communities are fighting for their lives and their livelihoods. Working families in the Green Bay area are dealing with a global health pandemic and the painful economic recession. The stakes have never been higher. We have tapes that show Donald Trump knew how much more deadly COVID was than the flu. He knew, and he purposely downplayed it. Worse, he knowingly and willingly lied to the American people about the threat that it posed to our communities. And while a deadly disease rips through our communities, he failed to do his job on purpose. It doesn't have to be this way. We have a candidate in Joe Biden with the experience to help us recover and the empathy to help our country heal. Joe sees this election as Park Avenue versus Scranton. And we've got a president who can only see as far as Wall Street and who's looking down on working people. And next, I'll turn things over to Shannon Holsey, president of the Stockbridge Muncie Band of Mohegan Indians. Welcome.
Thank you. And happy Indigenous Day to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And not to reiterate the former representative, and it may sound cliche, but it certainly is the case in 2020. It may well be the very most important election of our lifetimes. Nowhere is this reality truer than in Indian country. From the COVID-19 response and relief, strengthening our economy and supporting small businesses, to the respective tribal and sovereign rights. The results of this 2020 election will have huge impact on our future. My name is Shannon Holsey, and I'm the president of the Stockbridge Muncie Band of Mohegan Indians, located in Shawano County here in Wisconsin. I'm one of 11 tribal sovereign leaders within the state of Wisconsin. Native Americans are thriving and entrepreneurial and some of the largest employers in the respective state of Wisconsin. So to Representative Hintz, a lot is at stake. You know, our voices are needed to make the case for continued and sustained response to not only COVID-19 from a public health response, but the economic impacts and adequate physical and digital infrastructure where the tribal communities were hit particularly hard by this pandemic, having to find new ways and creative ways without the necessary resource and infrastructure to do that. While some are beginning to turn the corner, we certainly are not out of the woods. It will take a continued financial commitment from the federal government to help us through this crisis. A recent survey resulted that more than 400 tribally or native-owned businesses confirmed that their communities needed assistance. That holds same true in the state of Wisconsin. Almost 2/3 of our businesses have been significantly impacted with losses of revenue, and more than 40% of them have been forced to lay off our employees, many of which are the largest employers within the respective state of Wisconsin. Both here at Stockbridge, Muncie, and Shawano County, where there are two tribes, one contiguous Menominee Nation in Stockbridge and Oneida Nation. Of course, to the south, you have Forest County, Potawatomi, which had significant revenue losses and layoffs, which significantly impacted our state. Nearly half of those respondents believed it will be more than at least a year or two to resume to normal. And certainly, most importantly, you can't think about the fate of Indian country when you think about how it's tied to our judicial system and the highest court of land. Incidentally, today, starting those hearings, Justice Ginsburg was a long champion of equality and giving a voice to often the voiceless, including when it comes to tribal and native rights. As we celebrate today Indigenous Peoples Day, which in the state of Wisconsin is proclaimed Indigenous Day, replacing Columbus Day, due in part to telling the narrative in a true depiction of the people that were indigenous of this land. And when she said, when you think about Justice Ginsburg and the type of representation needs, it's to fight for things that you care about, but in a way that will lead to others to enjoy us. And ensuring her replacement, as well as other federal judgments, having a deep understanding of respect for things that matter most to all of us. And in Indigenous communities, that sovereignty. Today, and most importantly, we have an opportunity to expand that in our voices and influence in nearly all levels of government. In this presidential contest, the Native vote and the Native voice and your voices are an opportunity for us to turn Wisconsin blue and make a significant difference about who is going to be sworn into the White House in January. I think it's hard to miss that, the politics seem to be very divisive and they're rough-edged, but it's also a time to determine leadership, and representation really matters. I think however you decide to cast your ballot, I think you cannot ignore the fact that it's important to decide this country's future, because we get to decide right now what kind of nation we choose to be. And if you do not vote, you are willing to give up that power. Change and progress don't happen if you sit at the sidelines and leave it for others to decide for the future. And Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris have a plan for us all, from economic recovery to balance and create a safe environment moving forward, from affordable health care to affordable and quality education for our children, to bringing back and supporting small businesses and helping us recover from this pandemic. I always tell people this pandemic has created brought to light a lot of the vulnerabilities that existed, especially in Native communities, but it's also brought back the humanity to what we all need. We have to get back as a country, because it's not left, it's not right, and it's forward. And I believe that Kamala Harris and Vice President Biden will be that leadership that's needed now. And now I'd like to introduce Daniel DeLee.
Good afternoon, folks. As a lifelong Green Bay resident, I'm pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you today. To give you a little bit of background, I spent 44 years in manufacturing, during which I had the opportunity to serve my local labor union, United Steelworkers, as a shop steward, working my way up eventually to union president. And in 2018, I had the opportunity to run for and was elected Secretary Treasurer of the Wisconsin State AFL-CIO. Let me start by saying that, from a worker's standpoint, the stakes have never been higher when it comes to this election. When Donald Trump ran in 2016, he masqueraded as a champion for working class Americans. He fooled a lot of people. After nearly 4 years of Donald Trump, we know all too well that that couldn't have been any further from the truth. Donald Trump's callousness towards working people has never been more apparent than in his failed response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He started again by lying to the American people about the threat, and then waited months before he acknowledged the seriousness of the pandemic. This delay in response has contributed to the spread of the virus, resulting in an astounding loss of life that has now exceeded 200,000 people, along with the loss of millions of jobs. Extremely troubling is the impact that this has had on essential workers. Everyone from nurses to grocery store workers to transit workers, just to name a few, were forced to show up to work every day despite the health emergency. And in all too many cases, these workers were forced to work without the proper personal protective equipment that they needed to keep themselves safe. Even before the pandemic, though, Wisconsin's working families were struggling because of the Trump administration's failed economic policies. President Trump's tax bill padded the pockets of corporate executives and Wall Street investors. He gave huge tax cuts to the largest multinationals with no requirement that they invest in the United States or favor US jobs over offshoring, but left working families here in Wisconsin fending for themselves. And as long as we're talking taxes, wouldn't it be nice to only have to pay $750 in federal taxes while raking in millions, really? As if this wasn't enough, we can't lose sight of Donald Trump's ongoing and blatant assault on unions and the laws and the agencies designed to protect workers' rights. But folks, it doesn't have to be this way. As president, Joe Biden will be in our corner, not Wall Street's. Joe Biden has the experience to help us recover, the plans to build our economy back better, and the vision to restore dignity and hard work. Joe believes that American workers can outcompete anyone, but their government needs to fight for them. Joe Biden's comprehensive Made in America strategy will marshal the resources of the federal government in ways that we have not seen since World War II. Joe Biden understands that to build back better, we must buy American. Joe will make sure that we treat all American workers as essential all the time, not just in times of emergencies. Joe Biden understands that it's unions that built the working class. It's unions that helped build a strong middle class. It's unions that brought workers a 40-hour work week, things like paid sick leave, healthcare protections, and a voice in the workplace. That is why Joe Biden supports strengthening worker rights to join a union and bargain collectively. As president, Joe Biden will tackle the unique challenges facing working families and American manufacturers. Joe has bold plans to revitalize our manufacturing industry and create millions of good-paying jobs for hardworking Wisconsin families. These steps will put money back in the pockets of Wisconsin's working families. So folks, the need for change has never been more clear. Donald Trump's 4-year run as president has been an utter failure, the likes of which this country has never seen before. We must do everything we can to make sure that Joe Biden is elected president and Donald Trump is evicted from the White House. So with that, I am quite honored and pleased to introduce to you Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Thanks so much, and thanks for your work and your leadership. One of the reasons I'm proud to be a Democrat is that we stand with organized labor. And we know the difference that organized labor makes right now to make sure that more Americans can live well and work well. Thank you, President Holsey. It's great to be with you and wishing you happy Indigenous Day from here in the homeland of the Pikagan Band of Potawatomi Indians. We were very proud when Indian country came to South Bend. Leader Hintz, thanks so much for what you were doing. We're here for the Biden-Harris campaign, but we know how important the state legislative level is too. And I know that you're standing up for working families across Wisconsin, and I thank you so much for that. And thanks to everybody who signed on to this call. Look, we are T-minus 3 weeks and change, and we are in the middle of what really is one of the most important political moments in the life of the Republic. And every time it feels like the stakes couldn't possibly get higher, they get higher. When I was running for president just at the beginning of this same year we're in, I couldn't have imagined just how many blows would be dealt to us, how many crises we would be facing with the pandemic, with the moral crises over justice in this country, and with the need to turn a corner before it's too late. And nothing is more disturbing to me than the ways in which this president has tried to pass himself off as a friend of working people. I come from a community not so far from where you all live, a river city that's known for a university, but that built itself around the auto industry and got clobbered by decisions that were made and crises that happened to the auto industry more than 50 years ago. We were still dealing with it when I became mayor at the beginning of this last decade. I've seen how much is on the line in making sure that workers are supported. Matter of fact, part of how I got into politics and running for office was defending the tough decision that the Obama-Biden administration made to save manufacturing jobs in this country, something that wasn't popular at the time and that a lot of people fought tooth and nail. Joe Biden has been a friend to working families and workers because it's his life. It's where he comes from. He didn't grow up a multimillionaire. He didn't have an opportunity to pass himself off as having bone spurs so somebody could go serve in his place. He didn't set up a home in a giant building in Manhattan with his name on it. He is a product of the American middle class. And it's one of the reasons he knows just how much is at stake at a moment like this. They're trying to tell us that the economy is doing great. They inherited a recovery and turned it into the kind of near depression that will have President Trump potentially leave office as the first president since Herbert Hoover to have less jobs on leaving than he did when he arrived. And it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to have a president who thinks that paying taxes is for suckers. We don't have to have an economy that is always on the edge of falling off a cliff because they can't handle something as serious as a pandemic. We don't have to have infinite tax cuts for the top 1% in corporations while the rest of us are expected to make do with reduced services and shoulder a higher tax burden than some of the wealthiest people in this country. It doesn't have to be like this. Joe Biden will make sure that we treat all workers as essential all of the time, not just in times of crisis. He believes we got to pay workers, not just praise them. He believes in a decent wage, at least $15 an hour. And he understands the need to tackle the unique challenges facing families and American manufacturers. He understands why we need things like paid sick leave and affordable childcare and healthcare for everybody, which, by the way, is one of the things that's at stake right now in this debate over the Supreme Court. And of course, Joe Biden, like most Americans, believes that the winner of this presidential election ought to be the one to decide who ought to be on the Supreme Court to make decisions about things like your healthcare. Now, if you're on this call, there's a pretty good chance that I'm preaching to the choir. We're probably already convinced of how important this election is, but I want to make sure I remind you how significant Wisconsin is in that story. I'm getting ready to vote early here in Indiana, and I'll be proud to do it, voting for great candidates up and down the ticket. But some states are going to get more attention this year than others, and all eyes are on Wisconsin. We know how close this race is going to be. We know how important the state of Wisconsin is going to be. And we have an opportunity to send a message. And that message will be heard nationwide. Now, if you're like me, living here in the Midwest, there are people in your life, maybe in your workplace, maybe in your family, who view things a little bit differently. This is an opportunity to let many of our Republican friends know that this is no ordinary year and Donald Trump is no ordinary Republican. That might be one of the reasons why we've seen so many Republicans, including former chairs of the Republican National Committee, standing side by side with independents and moderate and progressive Democrats, all pulling together to get this done. This is an opportunity to let folks know it's okay to change your mind, especially when our economy, our communities, our families, our healthcare, our paychecks are on the line. Now, you probably also have some friends who are making up their mind whether to vote. And they're the ones who need to hear the message that this is your moment of maximum power, especially in a place like Wisconsin. And it's so important that you know how to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. We know this year is a little bit different. Every state is different. In Wisconsin, there's an opportunity to vote in person starting October 20th. We also want to make sure those who are able to vote by mail do so as quickly as possible. And the people who are planning to vote on election day know how to do it. So encourage people to go to iwillvote.com/WI to get the information for Wisconsin. And the last thing I want to mention is I've heard a lot of people wringing their hands saying, can we do campaigning with COVID? Do we know how to run an effective campaign during a pandemic? You are the answer to that. You're the answer to that because if you're willing to volunteer in ways that maybe we're not used to, look, I'm like everybody else. It doesn't come to me naturally to go out with a clipboard and knock on doors. And so I love starting off in a campaign office where there's the smell of coffee and a volunteer sitting next to me when we're making those calls or making those, getting ready to take a packet out into a neighborhood. And it's just different this year. But what we do right now is going to help shape how politics works in the future. And it starts with things like virtual phone banks, calling our neighbors. And there's one coming up tonight. So I really hope that you will join what's called Mayor Monday. This is my kind of phone bank. It's a virtual phone bank. It's running tonight from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. With some phenomenal mayors. My friend Madison Mayor Satya Conway Rhodes is going to be there. Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett's going to be there. Manitowoc Mayor Justin Nichols from right across the lake from Ludington, he's going to be there. I can't claim that I've made it up to Superior, but it's exciting to know that all the way up north, Mayor Jim Payne is going to be there. Check the chat. You're going to see a link to sign up, and I hope you take advantage of it, because this is how we're actually going to be able to win. And with that, I want to turn it over to Sarah Brown, somebody I know because she did a great job when we were working together in Iowa. The Biden-Harris campaign's lucky to have her. She's our organizer in rural Brown County. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Pete. Thank you all again for coming. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the organizers in Brown County, Wisconsin. So before working in Iowa, I organized the Iowa caucuses with Pete for America. And so I've been organizing for about a year now across 4 states and 2 presidential campaigns. For about a year now, it's been my job to ask people to find hope after a really hard 4 years, and then to take that hope and donate hours, days, weeks, and even months of their lives to act on it. So when I was asked to write this field pitch, I had to try to figure out how I wanted to sum up that year. And what I kept coming back to were the people who, when I asked them to hope, said yes. Holden is an 11-year-old who phone banks for me about once a week. Jaden is a high school junior who was a precinct captain for us in the Iowa caucuses. Elizabeth opened up her home for a full 3 weeks before the caucuses to be a staging location. And Liz finds time to phone bank not only 3 times a week, but also to be our staging location director and run our phone banks on weekends. I've met hundreds of campaign staff who have given up their lives and their families to move across the country and work 80 hours a week, and then lose, and then get up and join another campaign and fight again. I've met hundreds of volunteers who have given time that they have barely had because they believe that we can expect more from our leaders. When people say politics is ugly, I say it doesn't have to be. And when people say politics is crooked, I say that you don't know the people that I know. We have 22 days, and I know we can win. Not because of the polls, but because of the people I know we have on our side. So I have to ask you this one more time. I need all of you to find whatever hope you've got left, and I need you to turn it into a phone banking shift. Go into the chat right now and sign up for the Mayor Mondays tonight at 6 p.m. or any other Monday until the election until 6 p.m. And then once you've done that, go online to wisdoms.org and sign up for 5 more phone banking shifts at your local organizer's location. We all know phone banking is hard. We all know it's a little uncomfortable to talk to strangers, but if any moment demands uncomfortable things from us, it's this moment. We're all busy, but we all have an hour. So with that, to close, let me just say that I'm incredibly grateful to have been in this fight for the past year. And I want you to phone bank, not for me, not because I told you to do so, but for the people in your life who won't have healthcare if we lose, for the women who may no longer have the right to choose who you know, and for the people in your life who have died from COVID or who have lost their jobs in a pandemic that did not have to be this bad. On November 4th, I know that I can say that I have done absolutely everything I can to make sure that Donald Trump is no longer the president in 2021. Please make sure that you can say the same. Thank you all again for coming. Please take care of yourselves, and we'll see you tonight.